Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Apologies if you are watching this live for the slightly late start. I got myself a new laptop, I got myself a new microphone. I thought all of the audio problems are going to be solved. Tried it 2 hours before the stream. Perfect. I did a few little private live streams. The world would never see me singing Queen songs. Wonderful audio. Loved it. 20 minutes beforehand. Worked perfectly. Went to go live. We do not recognize this microphone. So, apologies for the late start, and apologies that I'm still on the old setup, but there we are. So that's what's going on here. But today, with no other further ado, we will talk about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. And this is sort of a season review, really. This is just sort of breaking down the whole season, looking forward a little bit to season two. And I'm going to do a bit of a breakdown as well in a few days' time with a special guest. So I hope you're looking forward to that. But for now, let's just do the Q&A. So let's go straight in with a question from SGH saying, do you think there's any magical significance to the two previous non-Targaryen queens being a Dane and a Blackwood, two very magical houses? I do. I did a video ages ago, which may now not be up. If you look at the Targaryen family tree, then you will see that it is just, and I'm going to do another video, just by the way, about the Targaryen marriage policy. This is actually quite interesting. But if you look at their family tree, you'll find on the line that takes us all the way through to the characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, so Dany and Jon and people like that, they marry other Targaryens or other Valyrians or people from other magical parts of the Seven Kingdoms. So House Blackwood, House Arryn, House Dane. So is it significant? Yes, I think it is. Who manufactured it that way? When in doubt. Okay, let's go with Per Marcus Risman. 7 blessings to you, Robert and the mods, from a north gripped by the winds of a bad winter. I felt like the show underscored the animosity against the Targaryens. It kind of took me by surprise because I don't remember it from the books. Seeing as George R. R. Martin was involved in the series, I would appreciate it if you could expand on what you think about it. I can't decide if it was just world building and explaining why so many highborn and lowborn rallied to Dunk, or if they're just trying to set something up for the Blackfire Rebellion. Well, let's first of all talk about George R. R. Martin's involvement in this, because he was not a showrunner. And I think we should probably be clear about that. So this isn't him writing this story. The story, Ira Parker was the showrunner, so he was in charge of the story as a whole. He is close to George R. R. Martin. And he said, and I think we can believe him, that he was very keen for nothing to be in the show that George R. R. Martin had vetoed. So that doesn't mean that George R. R. Martin is mad keen about everything, but it means that there's nothing that he said, no, that's absolutely not going to happen. So, as an example of one thing that we know that George R. R. Martin did talk about was the scene about a minute into episode 1. You know the scene I'm talking about, when Dunk is there and he's lifting up the sword, and then suddenly nature calls him. Ira Parker was insistent that that was in the show. And he's also very open about the fact that he put it to George R. R. Martin, and George R. R. Martin was like, I'm not so sure. But Ira Parker wanted it, and it happened there. From what we know, if George R. R. Martin had said no, that's against canon, it would have been out. But it wasn't against canon, so yeah, it was a directorial decision, as it were. So that's the situation with George R. R. Martin, is that he is involved. He probably has a veto on things, but don't think that everything that happens he said yes to. There will be some things that are intentionally left vague, or he's not so sure about, but he's okay because he understands that's how TV works. So that's the first bit. In terms of sort of why this whole idea of like the anti-Targaryen feeling was there. So this is new, it has to be said. And it did crop up quite a lot in this season. Raymond Fossaway says it out loud. You know, they're just aliens and whatever he went on with. Lionel Baratheon came out very strongly against the Targaryens. The small folk, it wasn't overt, but they were quite happy to kind of laugh and joke against the Targaryens. So what we've got here is this idea of the Targaryens ruling, but most people not really liking it. So is that from George? It's not directly from George, but he's probably okay with it. Now, one thing that we do know is that Egg, when he becomes king, Aegon the Fifth, he will face a lot of opposition. People will not like his reforms. And we also know that he decides that the only way, eventually, it took him a couple of decades as king, but he decides that the only way for him to enforce his rule is to get the dragons back. And the dragons, I think, are the key here, because when we get to House of the Dragon and the first 150 so years of Targaryen rule, no one could oppose them because the dragons were so powerful. If you just came out then and opposed the Targaryens, then they would just fly a dragon over and burn you. And that's it. There's no other option going on there. So when the dragons have gone, the Targaryens have stayed in control. And people are like, well, why are they in control? I get it that they could kill us when they had dragons, but now what makes them so special? Added to which, and the added layer that they've sort of pushed in here, I think, which is pretty good, is this idea that what have they actually brought? Since the initial invasion, how many civil wars have we had? So you get Aegon's invasion was a long civil war, effectively, when you take into account what happened with Dawn. Then after that, you get under Aenison, then Maegor, you get a civil war against the Faith of the Seven. Jaehaerys and Viserys, mostly peaceful, but then you get the Dance of the Dragons, and then you move forward a few more years, and then you get the Blackfire Rebellion, and it's a matter of what have they brought us? Just civil war and death and destruction year after year after year. And I quite like the fact that they're picking up on this. So one of the distinctives of Dunk and Egg and A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is that this is coming from the perspective of the small folk. Well, it's Dunk's perspective. And it's not from the 1%, the people who have benefited from all of this. This is from the normal people. And the normal people are there going, well, why should they rule? They can't just fly over us and burn us to a crisp now. What makes them anointed rulers? Not much. So I quite like it. I quite like this simmering undercurrent that is definitely going to be carrying on all the way through the well, however many series we get. Let's go to a question from Kais Ballerina. Can we talk about the Summerhall spoiler from Dexter? Yes, I think we talked about this a little bit last week. But let's talk about it a little bit more. So this is, well, maybe a week or so ago. We had an interview with Dexter and Peter, so Dunk and Egg, and I think it was on Irish TV. I think they were making stock puppets. I don't understand all the context, but they were chatting away about, oh, and George R. R. Martin came to talk to you, and what did he say? And it was just like a really, I mean, this wasn't a hard-hitting interview. This was nice and happy and pleasant. And then Dexter just like says, "Oh yeah, he talked to us and he told us about Summerhall, but we know that Dunk survives." And then Peter Claffey is there as Dunk, and he's like, "No." Um, the clear implication is that George R. R. Martin told them this, what their fates were as characters, and Dexter Solancel, he's a kid. He didn't really understand that he probably shouldn't tell people this, and he let it spill. So, what do we make of this? Well, I think the first thing we have to say is I hope he doesn't beat himself up about this. This did seem like a genuine spoiler. It did seem like George had said something to them, and Dexter just revealed it, and he probably shouldn't have. I hope he doesn't like feel bad about it because like the fandom loved it, and I don't think it it changes too much. So uh, that I think is the first point. So the idea that they are um, going to get to Summerhall and then Egg will die and Dunk will survive. What does this mean? Well, we have to go back to the text, and this is the first of 2 or 3 times in the TV show where I think we're challenged to reevaluate what we read, because we're never told that Dunk dies at Summerhall. We're told that, but for the valor of the Lord Commander, dot dot dot. Implication being that he did something heroic, he saved some lives, whatever. And then he disappears. And clearly, Egg seems to die because we get a new king. His son, Duncan, Sir Duncan the Small, seems to die because, we never hear from him again. And his wife, Jenny of Earlstone, seems to die because of what the ghost of High Heart says. Dunk, we assumed died because he was replaced as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. That doesn't mean that he necessarily did die. Now, I have done a video, I think it's come out now, about. I mean, it was based on this theory that is Dunk now cold hands, but I think the first part of the theory actually stands up. which is that if Dunk, as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, he's an honourable man, and if he failed to protect his king, if he failed to protect his friend, even if he did some honourable act to save someone else, what would he do? Would he carry on in the Kingsguard and say, "Oh, okay, I'll just carry on being part of the Kingsguard to whoever's next"? That doesn't feel right. He's an honourable man. Probably he would have said, "I'm going to go up to the wall." And added to all of that, there is a huge, go look at the video if you want, but there's a huge amount of kind of textual evidence connecting Dunk to the wall. He, just as a couple of random examples, he thinks that his father might be there randomly. He thinks, oh, okay, maybe if I went to the wall, then I'd meet somebody who was really tall and looked a bit like me. And then almost the last sentence of book 2, Egg says, we should go to the wall. Why? Because it's tall, equating it to Dunk. There's a couple of characters up there, Small Paul as an example, who and Gren, who they have echoes of Dunk. They're both called Thick as a Castle Wall, which implies maybe they're descendants. So all of the hints are that maybe he does get to the wall at some point. So what do we think about this? Assuming it's true, which I think we probably should assume, then yeah, it kind of alters our perception, and I think gives us an understanding of how George R. R. Martin has treated these first 3 novellas. We shouldn't treat them as these kind of literal truths. It's all from Dunk's perspective. So maybe there are some things that are a little bit nuanced and clouded in there that we should look again at and try and work out, is that really what happened, or is there another layer going on? Michael Trainer, a quick Google search tells me Dunk and Egg go to Dawn and Old Town prior to the events of the second novellas. Do you think the second season will explore these events or spoil some unpublished material? So yeah, they head towards Dawn. They're going to try and find Tansel, too tall. That's the idea. This is good for them because 3 months after the events of the tourney at Ashford, then the spring sickness hits. And this is terrible. This isn't just like, everyone gets a little bit sick. This kills, devastates quarter of cities. And it has a huge impact, firstly, on the line of inheritance of the Iron Throne. So you will remember, so Baelor died. He was the heir to the throne, but he had 2 children. Both of them also died in the spring sickness, as did the king. So suddenly, we get within the space of 3 months, the king, the heir, the deputy heir, and the deputy heir, so to speak, all die. That is hugely significant. And what does that mean for Dunk and Egg? Well, Dunk and Egg were down in Dawn. And Dawn is one of the few places in the Seven Kingdoms that managed to escape. So that's the first place they go. Then after that, they head over to Old Town. And we get a few memories there of Dunk going to see his brother, his favourite brother, Aemon. We obviously know Aemon as Maester Aemon, and he's at the time training in Old Town, and he measures Dunk, and he measures him at 6'11", which I can't do the maths in my head immediately, but is very tall for metric people. So George R. R. Martin has said about a year ago, when he's thinking about Dunk and Egg stories, he has said that he's got a couple of stories that we know about, but he does wonder whether he should have done one set in Dawn. So, is that one of the ones that he's there talking to Ira Parker about? I suspect probably not. Will we get flashbacks? I suspect probably yes. I suspect we probably will get a flashback to Old Town with Maester Aemon. That seems to be quite an important moment for Egg. And for Dunk, it's quite an important moment when they're in Dawn and they have to bury a horse. You know how much he loves his horses. So, yes, I think we will get flashbacks to those things. But I don't think it's going to spoil unpublished materials unless George R. Martin writes a lot of Dunk and Egg stories. I think the next Dunk and Egg stories that we know of are almost certainly going to be the ones that he's already trailed. So the Village Hero and the She-Wolves of Winterfell. Clueless Fangirl, hello, good to see you. I've got another question in the chat somewhere. Trisha Brady, thoughts on the music choices for the finale? I didn't mind the opening music, but the closing song was just weird. This has divided opinion, it has to be said. So the opening music was kind of like a jazzy kind of thing. The closing music, I didn't know, but I think a lot of people knew. Neither were sort of fantasy Middle Ages-y, which I don't mind, but I think I think I'd have preferred something else. I love the overall musical theme of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I think and I forget the composer's name. I think he did really well because Dunk and Egg should be fun. It should be light. It should be kind of whimsical. It should be living within the Game of Thrones world, but not dominated by it. And I think most of the time it actually worked perfectly. I would have to say I didn't really like the jazz, and I wasn't 100% convinced by the closing music. That probably puts me in a minority, but yeah, okay, so be it. Caius Ballerina, does Dunk surviving Summerhall help solve the Brienne problem? If he leaves the Kingsguard after Summerhall, he could marry whoever leads to Brienne, Tarth or Targ. Yeah, I don't think there is a Brienne problem. In as much as we know that Brienne, and for those who don't know this, we know that Brienne is a descendant of Dunk. We just don't know how or where or when. We've got various fan theories, but we do know that his shield was there on Tarth, which kind of implies that he left in a rush. So if I had to guess, it was more during his younger days that he was there and he had to leave in a rush. I think when Summerhall happened, Dunk was in his mid to late 60s. We don't know the exact age. He doesn't know when he was born, so mid to late 60s. I mean, it's not, obviously, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he might have randomly headed off to Tarth and then I guess at that point it would be the grandfather, become the grandfather of Brienne, but I I think it makes more sense, particularly as they kind of teased the link into it to Tarth through Lionel Baratheon. So perhaps they do go and see Lionel and they meet him in Tarth, and I don't know, something happens. Um, Clueless Fangirl saying, "Can you talk faster? I want to listen to this on 1.5 speed. Watch it later. Put it on 1.5 speed." Um, let's go to. I think that's all my questions from the chat. So let's go to a question from Madeline Tyrell the Dane. Hi, Robert. I love this episode and the season as a whole. Hope you did too. What is your interpretation of why they included the scene where Arlen was telling the penny tree story and it's linked to Dunk nailing the penny to the tree at the end? So, yeah, I mean, I liked that. I have speculated on why there are pennies on that tree a couple of times on these live streams. It seems like I wasn't right. But we got the story from Sir Arlen, and basically it was when people got called up to go to war, they would nail a tree into the nail a penny into the tree, and if they came back, they would take it off. So the penny tree has lots of pennies in there, and it's sad. So that's the story. Why does Dunk do it? Well, there's a connection, obviously, to Sir Arlen. He's respecting the tradition of Sir Arlen, but he's also taking that tradition and putting it to his tree. So this was history that he was all the way through the show, almost every episode. He sits down and leans against that tree. This was an important tree, and important things happened while he was, leaning against that tree. So him nailing a penny there was saying, "I'm now leaving. I'm now going off somewhere else, and it may well be I don't ever return." So this was him acknowledging what Sir Arlen had given him, but then also acknowledging that whatever happened there at Ashford, he was moving away from. He was going on to something new. So I thought it was quite nice as a little scene. It was left open to interpretation, but I like that. Um, Agalos Lukatos. Hi, Robert. I hope you're well. I am well, thank you. What do you think of the decision to have Egg leave with Dunk in secret? I don't mind small changes and adaptations, but that was a decision that could lead to major repercussions in the story, unless they decide to ignore it altogether. Okay, so if you missed this, and you may have missed this, and if you were a show only person, you definitely missed this. There is a slight difference in what happens at the end. Now, in the books, Maekar comes to Dunk, they have the conversation. Dunk does the kind of really kind of cool but killer lines all about Darren and all the meat that Arian ate was nice and rare and bloody, and Darren never slept in ditches, and he kind of leaves it hanging as a kind of, so what you've tried as parenting clearly never worked. Maybe something else would. And in the novella, then we get Maekar just going, nah, and going out. And then Dunk hears him riding away. So we don't ever get him saying, "Okay, you go." What we do get is that very next paragraph is Egg turns up and says, "My father said I can go with you." And oh, hey, I've got this ring. We'll find out later. We got this ring, his ring, to prove that I'm a Targaryen if ever I get into some trouble. So the fandom as a whole interpreted that for a very long time. I also interpreted that as for a very long time as Maekar kind of accepted that he'd not done well on his oldest two children. And so what had he got to lose with his youngest child? Just to let him go. And that felt like quite a growth thing for Maekar. What we have in the show is that Egg was listening into the conversation. Maekar doesn't listen to what Duncan is saying and then just like walk out. He stops and says, "He's my last son," kind of implying no. Then Egg turns up and says, "My father has said whatever," and Duncan Egg carry on. But then we get Maekar going, "Where's Egg? Where's he gone?" Egg has clearly gone without his permission, and eagle-eyed people have checked, and they saw that Maekar was wearing his ring, his signet ring, the ring that showed that this person is a Targaryen, and it was missing in that last scene. The implication is that Egg stole it. So we have a kind of a discrepancy between the two. I say kind of because it's never 100% said that Maekar allowed this. You could draw a line through it if you want that Egg did run off without telling Maekar. So that's kind of fuzzy. Which do I prefer? I prefer the book version. I have to say, I prefer this idea that he um, came to accept and understand that the way that he brought up his children probably wasn't perfect, and Dunk seems to actually be a good person, and he went out to Dunk to have this conversation. That I kind of like. Also, with that, it means that Egg, he'd moved on from the lying and the stealing and all of those bits of his character, and he'd just won the day. He hadn't just gone back to where he was before. There was some character growth for Egg as well as some character growth for his father. So I think I prefer the novella version. All of that said, two things. The first thing is that what I've learned the further into the show I've got, and the more I've read Ira Parker doing interviews, the more I've come to the understanding that when in doubt, the show is just fun. They're trying to do fun things, and that last scene was fun. Maekar going, "Where's Aegon?" Well, it was fun. So that's the first point. The second point is that they can just retcon all of this off screen. They can just say, "Okay, so Maekar tracked him down and said, all right, if you insist, then here, you can have that ring, you can keep it, just stay in contact." And they can do that, and it wouldn't affect anything in the plot going forward. I guess the third point, I said there was 2 points. The third point is that set in the context of what's about to happen, 3 months after this, the spring sickness, the great spring sickness, hits everywhere. Maekar, whatever attempts he'd made to try to track down his son, they were going to be undermined by the fact that a third of the kingdom were about to die. His mind was on other things. Perhaps his spies had told him that Egg was safe in Dawn. and he would have just left it like that. So, okay, you can stay there. You can do your thing. We're trying to deal with the fact that the king has died and the heir to the throne has died and the other heir to the throne has died. So it does kind of work. If you want to make it work, you can. Uh, Gabriel Farrell, I hope you enjoyed the season as much as I did. I did. How much angry muttering did you do during the "Why didn't you knight me" death fake out? I was so busy complaining to my wife, I almost missed Sir Arlen waking up. Okay, so yes, I do have a sort of a minor grumble about this, which is the fact that there were a few moments, and you can probably think of a few others, where I was taken out of the action. I was taken out of the action thinking, oh, that's the director or the showrunners or the writer doing a fun thing, rather than being in the action and living it. In this instance, we thought, oh, he's died. And Dunk started to cry, and then suddenly you're like, oh, no, he's back. It's okay. And then maybe he does. And that felt like a bit of directorial affectation. So that's a minor gripe. I loved the show, but there were a few things like that. You can probably think of other moments where it was like, oh, yeah, the director decided to do that. They didn't have to. The bigger picture is that, as I understand it, there were two moments that George R. R. Martin said, I want to remain ambiguous. One of them was what we were just talking about, which was what happened when they rode away. Was this Maekar giving his blessing? Was this Egg running off? He wanted that to remain ambiguous. The second was Dunk actually knighted? So maybe he's setting those things up for later in the series, or maybe he just likes the idea that they're ambiguous. But either way, the big picture here is that the ambiguity was from George R. R. Martin, not just the showrunner. Let's go to Lady Pushkin saying, hi, Robert. Wow, what a season. Really enjoyed it. I think it has also piqued an interest in lesser known houses where we don't have much backstory. Do you think George R. R. Martin will leave it to the showrunners to give them this? I'm currently in Belfast and I've been to the Game of Thrones studio tour as a surprise for my birthday on the 25th. That was yesterday. Birthday for yesterday. Absolutely fabulous in all areas. The photos and videos don't do it justice. The staff even gave me a Michelle Clapton drawing of Brienne for a birthday card. Just wonderful. Well, yeah, I'm ashamed to say I've never been to the Game of Thrones studio tour in Belfast. One of my plans for this year is to rectify that. So, yeah, expect me to be sending lots of pictures of me standing next to the Iron Throne and pointing at it and smiling. So that will be happening at some point this year. As for the sort of the other question about the smaller houses, has George R. R. Martin said that he's okay for that to be left? I mean, I don't think he's explicitly said it, but I think the clear implication is that we've got extra information about House Beesbury, the burial rites of House Beesbury, House Fossaway, what happened to the cadet branch of House Fossaway. I think, oh, pardon me, also like Lionel Baratheon, slightly larger house, obviously, but I think he's okay with this idea that showrunners on his show will add to the lore, particularly when it comes to smaller houses. So, might we expect to see some more of that? Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Diego Godoy. Hola, Robert. Honor to you. What were your thoughts on the final episode regarding Maekar summoning Dunk to him? instead of him going to Dunk when he's recovering by the tree, as in the book. For me, the book version shows a lot of humbleness from Maekar, which I thought was missing from the show. Yeah, so that I think we now have to say that there are two accounts of this. There are two bits of canon. Now, George R. R. Martin did a couple of years ago. He did, I think it was with History of Westeros, a great interview when he was talking through his idea that there were two canons. There was book canon and there was show canon, and I think what we're looking at here is a difference between the two. So, in book canon, yes, I think that Maekar coming to see Dunk showed a bit about his character, and it showed a bit about him realizing that it's not just humility, it's just maybe he needs to reach out sometimes. That felt like quite an important step to me. That wasn't on the TV show, because on the TV show he summoned him, and on the TV show he was very clearly struggling with the death of his brother. You will see he was looking at the same book that Baelor was looking at earlier. He didn't want to sit in the same chair, but he sort of, you know, perched himself on the table next to it. He was struggling with this idea that his brother was dead. And those are two different versions of Maekar. We get the Maekar who is slightly humbled by this and is willing to learn, and as a result, perhaps he then says, okay, Egg can go off. Or we have the TV show version where he's not humbled by this. He's still just there thinking, I'm a Targaryen. My brother has died, but, there are standards we must keep. And he doesn't allow Egg to go with Dunk. So for me, this is a bit of a dichotomy. And I think they did this well in showing the difference. If they'd carried on all the way down the book path and he'd come out to Dunk and then not gone with what Dunk said, that would have felt a little bit wrong. Let's go to a question from Stephanie Lash saying, do you think the reason that Dunk was not knighted is that Sir Arlen was also not a true knight? Ooh, interesting. So we don't know huge amounts about the history of Sir Arlen of Pennytree. I was wondering whether to do a video about Sir Arlen. Let me know, put it down in the comments or something if you think that would be interesting. I like this idea, but they played up on it a little bit more, it has to be said, on the TV show than in the books. So in the TV show, it was, oh, you always wanted me to be a knight, and then why did you never knight me? They were pushing the angle, I think, quite a lot more than we had in the novellas. In the novellas, it was the kind of second reading when you go, oh, hang on a moment. Is that why he never did it? As in, he never knighted Raymond? It's not the thing which jumps out, I think. It's not a thing which jumps out immediately unless you're analysing the text immediately, if you're just skimming through it as a nice light read. It would very much echo Dunk, or pre-echo, whatever it is, in that him not knighting Dunk is because he actually was a true knight and he realised that he couldn't do that. And then Dunk was also a true knight but couldn't do that again. So that does kind of work. But on the TV show, they did kind of I'm going to struggle with this a little bit. They did kind of degrade his character a little bit. Now, those of us who have read the novellas will, I'm sure, have got to the end of the third one and gone, yeah, probably Dunk was hero worshipping Sir Arlen a little bit too much. Probably he wasn't all that, but we don't really have the evidence for it. On the TV show, they really put it in our face. And it was just like, no, he wasn't great. He had some good moments, and just in defense of Sir Arlen, he did, even when he was drunk, the first time he kind of like burst onto the scene, he was drunk and he shouted out, "In the name of the mother," and then took out the people who were attacking Dunk. And that is, in the name of the mother, I swear to protect the innocent. He was a knight who remembered his vows. So they got that bit right, but a lot of the rest of it, not so much. That he, in Dunk's memory in the novellas, he's a lot better as a character, and he's not so much of a drunkard. It has to be said. So, is the reason he wasn't knighted because Sir Arlen wasn't knighted? It's one of those things that you could have as headcanon. We not really got much evidence either way, I'm afraid. But yeah, it works for me, but I don't think we've got the evidence for it. Let's go to Flame G. Hello, Robert. I hope you're doing well. My question is related to what Egg says to Dunk, that there's 9 kingdoms, not 7. So how many kingdoms are there? I remember reading that the Iron Islands were a kingdom, but they don't appear in the official map I was looking at. Now, do the Crown Lands? Is Egg correct? And if so, why is it called the 7 kingdoms, not the 9 kingdoms? Okay, so I did do a rather pedantic tweet about this. But let's explain this. First up, as I said, my driving understanding of the entire show is that it is fun. And it was a fun scene. Egg correcting Dunk. Also, I think we'll probably pick up on this a little bit later, but the Dunk saying, "Are you mad?" And Egg being like, "Does it matter?" Because Dunk's this being fun and silly. Are you mad? And Egg is like, "Oh, what? Well, people think Targaryens are mad. I'm not mad. Maybe my brother's mad, not me. I'm not mad." So that was a whole extra layer, but mostly that was just a little bit of fun. But because we love this stuff, is it 9 kingdoms, not 7? Well, point number 1. The 7 kingdoms is the name of the realm. It is not a description of the realm. So all the way through the history from Aegon's invasion forwards, it is called the 7 kingdoms. That is not saying that there are, at any moment in time, 7 kingdoms there. The 7 kingdoms comes from the situation just before Aegon invaded, in which there were 7 kingdoms that he would invade. Now, technically, even then, there were 6 kingdoms and 1 principality. Dawn was a principality. But we get the Stormlands, Dawn as a principality. We get the Reach, the Westlands, the Kingdom of the Isles and the Riverlands. So that's the Iron Islands and the Riverlands connected, the Vale and the North, which is 7. So that's where the 7 come from. When Aegon invaded, he then conquered those 7 kingdoms, or at least he conquered 6 of them, because Dawn stayed outside the 7 kingdoms, but he still claimed to be king of them. If you look at his sort of kingly vows, he still claimed to be king of the Rhoynar. The Rhoynar being people who were in Dawn. But technically, he'd conquered 6 of those kingdoms and not the 7th. But then he, the Iron Islands and the Riverlands were separated. That was the kingdom of the Isles and the Rivers. And he created a Lord Paramount in the Riverlands and one over in the Iron Islands. And all of those people who had previously been kings, they were no longer kings. So, classic example in the north, we had the King of the North, the King of Winter, Torrhen Stark. He bent the knee. He was no longer a king. He was Lord Paramount of the North. He was Lord of Winterfell. So, however many kingdoms you might count as there being at that point, they then weren't kingdoms, they were regions, plus one principality who wasn't part of the whole system of governance. Added to which, there was a little bit of disputed land between the Stormlands and the Riverlands that the Targaryens took and called the Crown Lands. These were lands that they'd bent the knee direct to the Targaryens, rather than the king bent the knee. And so that area, which you know the names of the smaller towns, Rook's Rest, Duskendale, all of that kind of area around there, including King's Landing, that became the Crown Lands, and that had never had a king. But then the King of the Seven Kingdoms ruled over them direct. So that's the situation, is that there were 7 kingdoms / 6 kingdoms and 1 principality. After Aegon invaded, and many years later, once Dawn was part of this, then you had 9 regions, none of which were technically kingdoms. So to bring it back to the original point, the 7 kingdoms is the name, the legal name of the realm. It is not a description of there being 7 kingdoms. I hope that explains it. But it's one of those things where you can go down the nerdy route, but that's kind of missing the point that it was just a fun interaction. The next Freud, future story, Dunk needs a Valyrian steel sword. I mean, that would be cool, yeah, but they're very few and far between. So there are 200-ish Valyrian steel swords in Westeros, and they are pretty much all held by major lords, pardon me, of the land. So for Dunk to get a Valyrian steel sword would require something pretty impressive. That's not to say he won't. He may do, but we don't know that he does, and it would require a very impressive thing. To the extent that, so the Tourney of Ashford Meadow that we looked at in season 1, book 1, I don't think there were any Valyrian steel swords there at all, as far as we're aware. And that had huge, several members of the royal family, some of the most significant noble lords in the area. And no, I don't think there were any. We're not told of any Valyrian steel swords there. Jennifer Pierce says, looks like we're not getting a 4-hour marathon live today. Someone get that man some caffeine. Yeah, I haven't got any caffeine with me. I do apologize. So, yeah, it might not be a marathon 4-hour one today. Apologies. A bit of a slow start as well with all the tech issues. Let's go to Simran Singh. My first time watching any Game of Thrones related TV series. I have read the main Song of Ice and Fire books, and I definitely enjoyed A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We'll be watching season 2 when it's out. I noticed a lot of moody filler sequences with no talking, and note that you have mentioned that the Hedge Knight source book is a novella. Did they have to pad it out a bit, like The Hobbit being stretched into 3 films, or was this just a deliberate artistic choice? Lingering on Sir Raymond's hug was a great artistic choice, for example. Sir Raymond was a delight, a wonderful mix of loyalty, innocence, and ignorance. Yeah, I agree completely. Raymond Fossaway, I thought was a great character. And I agree, sort of holding on to that hug was good. He was a very human character, and Dunk is also a human character, but you do wonder how much love he's had in his life. He never knew his parents, and then he was raised by Sir Arlen, who, yes, took care of him, but doesn't seem to have been the most caring and loving of parental figures. So, the bigger picture, is it padded out? I wouldn't say padded out is the right way of looking at it. So, what we have is a story that we have a lot of the dialogue lifted out and used word for word, and all of the main sequences in the novella are used, but they added to it by extra characterization mostly. So Raymond Fossaway, he is a character in the story, but he gets a much bigger role in the TV show. So the whole end scene stuff, you don't get that at all. Uh, Similarly, Lionel Baratheon, who again is a part of the story, but the TV show expanded it out. The whole tug of war stuff, the whole um, getting drunk and dancing in his tent stuff, that was all an invention from the TV show. And you could carry on. There are various characters. The Duncan Tansel relationship, they added in a couple of extra scenes there. Uh, that kind of worked for me. There was a whole lot of extra stuff there to do with the tourney and just wandering around, and Dunk being taken aside by the master of the tourney, just like trying to turn him to sort of throw a fight, that kind of thing. It was actually the opposite of throwing a fight, but the overall feel was that they took the story from the novella and they kind of expanded it out character-wise. So if you're sort of au fait with the Hobbit movies, I would say it's more like the first Hobbit movie, An Unexpected Journey, which I actually really liked, I have to say, where they added in extra stuff with the characters, but they kept the main thrust of the story as was. It wasn't like the second and third ones where they added in lots of new characters, subplots that weren't there already, expanded out the battle scenes. That wasn't really where they went with this. I think personally that the character expansions were justified, and that's partly why I like it. Um, Tommy of Fen saying IDG is a big time Hobbit head. I'll take it. Zero saying, "Hello, Robert. I'm curious about your take on Lionel Baratheon. I get where he's coming from with the Kingsguard not allowed to harm a prince of the realm, but Baelor charged into an unknown fate. Do you think his criticism is valid, or Baelor leveling the playing field because Maekar ordered the Kingsguard to challenge?" So this is, I think, an episode 6 comment where Lionel's there basically saying he risked nothing. Baelor risked nothing. because the Kingsguard weren't going to attack him or kill him. Now, he did risk something. We see that by the fact that he died. The Kingsguard might not have attacked him, but his brother would have done. We know that for a fact. And Stefan Fossaway may not have been wanting to risk his new lordship by taking on to the heir to the throne. But Aerion, he's a bit of a wild card. I would agree that Baelor took on a risk to go in there. It wasn't as great a risk as the others did. That's pretty clear. Someone like Raymond Fossaway, he charged into combat. He wasn't even in full plate armor. I don't know whether you noticed, but it was like he turned up thinking he was going to be a squire with just a few leathers on, and then got knighted, and then just like jumped on a horse and went into battle. It was, he wasn't equipped for this, so he was the person who risked the most because he also knew that Stefan Fossaway definitely wanted to kill him. The Kingsguard definitely would have killed him. Aerion definitely would have done. So it's there are levels to this, but anyone going into that would have known that there was a risk of death. So what we're looking at is not Lionel Baratheon spitting facts. This is Lionel Baratheon setting out his point of view, which is slightly different. Chaos Ballerina saying INC has some Bloodraven tinfoil. It's claimed he can turn into mist. He wants to prune the Targaryen tree. The trial was covered in a mist. Either he uses it to kill Baelor or cause Maekar to. Maekar can't remember the death blow after all. Yeah, I mean, I'm a sucker for Bloodravens. Conspiracy theories. I shall probably I'll do a video on this again at some point. What happens over the next 20 years of the Targaryens is nothing short of astonishing in terms of how quickly they died. So here, we've already talked about it. Baelor dies, and then in the same year, the king, his father, dies, and also Baelor's two children die. And that entire bit of the family tree is wiped out, which means that then we get Aerys to be king, and he doesn't have children, and eventually he dies, and then we get Maekar. But what about Aerion? So we get a lot of these extra Targaryens in there, dotted throughout this family tree, who just randomly die. And when you look at how they died, it's choked on a lamprey pie. Some of them feel a little bit suspicious. So, given the amount of people who had to die in order for Egg to get onto the throne, and given the short period of time that happens, he is Aegon the Unlikely. It's very unlikely. It's not just a matter of, oh, well, that wasn't expected. He's like a third son. Oh, who would have expected a third son? He was the fourth son of a fourth son. He should definitely not have inherited. So, if you take that approach and say, okay, well, who was wanting to prune the Targaryen tree down? Yeah, Bloodraven. And there's a lot of mist going on there. Might he have done something there? It's possible. I'm okay with this idea. I do think that perhaps out of all the different Targaryen deaths during this period, this is the one I'm most likely just to put down to it happened. A Trial of Seven is 7 knights trying to kill each other. And the fact that one of them died, or more than one of them died, should not really be a surprise. So one thing you might have missed as a kind of a detail here is that Baelor was wearing his son's armor, which means it's a bit tight. Now, that means that when he's hit in the back of his head, there's no give. It's just bang, hits him. And when that kind of contracts in onto his head, and we know the rest of it's all a little bit gory, but you know what comes next. The implication is that he hadn't brought his own armor. And if he had brought his own armor, then maybe he might have survived that. The show, I think, did quite a good job of kind of twisting the perspective on that. So when we get Valar, Dunk goes to talk to Valar, and Valar's there, saying, you should never see your father die in your own armor, kind of thing. It's kind of hard because the hint is that Baelor had not expected to be taking part in any tourney. He just turned up there to watch his family and to represent Team Targaryen. And the reason why he died was because he hadn't expected to be a part of that, which means that his decision to be a part of that was on the spot. It wasn't premeditated. SGH, what do you think of the idea that the gods did decide the outcome of the Trial of the Seven by saving Dunk and by Baelor dying for his dishonorable tactics? I think I've got a question about this from one of my patrons a bit later. So I'll wrap this one up with this, that one up with this. So I've seen a few people trying to say that, or trying to justify that this is the Faith of the Seven in action. And if they're going to be in action anywhere, let's be honest, Trial of Seven is where they should be, because this is about justice, first of all, proving justice, and then 7 being the holy number on both sides. Do we have any evidence that Trials of Seven show justice? Well, probably not. If you go back to Maegor, but here, I have seen the theory, which I like. I have to say, I don't necessarily buy into it, but I like that Dunk, during his time at the tourney, met the 7. By which we mean that he met the crone, and you could imagine the crone, and he met the smith. Yeah, of course, he met a smith. And he met the mother. Oh yeah, there's somebody who was a mother that we didn't know was a mother. And he met the maiden. Oh yeah, he definitely met the maiden. And he met the father, and he met the warrior, and he definitely met the stranger. So I buy into this idea that if you're interpreting this through the faith of the 7, then he did meet all aspects of the 7. Does that mean that he got saved by it? I don't think they showed that on the TV show. I think they showed him getting up because Sir Arlen and his memories and Egg shouted at him, "Get up." If you're looking for a character who may have been saved / brought back by the 7, I would suggest you look at it was one of the first chapters in book 3, Storm of Swords, where we get Davos, who after the Battle of the Blackwater, he kind of wakes up on this little rock out in the sea, and he remembers the wildfire, and he's swimming underwater, and he keeps swimming and he keeps swimming. And he's looking up, and above him is burning, and he knows if he goes up, then he will die. And he keeps swimming and he keeps swimming, and he feels that he hears the mother from the Faith of the Seven talking to him. That is an incredibly spiritual moment that we often kind of glaze over because we don't think of him as being a particularly faithful person. But that entire chapter is him as a devout Faith of the Seven person saying, this happened because of Melisandre, who's brought her heretical religion in, and I need to go and confront it. So if you're looking for a Faith of the Seven intervention, I would go to there rather than to here, where we don't have any evidence that anything particularly happened. TK 117. Were you a fan of the new origin of the green apple fossilways? I mean, I think so. The green apple fossilways. This is Raymond Fossaway who founds the new fossilways. I mean, it wasn't too far off from the original. I have to say, I really liked his shield. It has a green apple on it, but it also was shaped like an apple. I loved that. And I also liked the humanity of him getting together with Rowan, I think her name was. That kind of really worked for me. So, yeah, I liked it. House Fossaway are not a significant player in this story. So if we give them a little bit more nuance, then that works for me. Commander Ray, as a channel member, I should pause right now to say, channel members, thank you very much. The best way to support this channel remains going to Patreon, but if you, for whatever reason, do not wish to go to Patreon, then you could become a channel member here. So thank you very much. And also, while I'm thinking of thank yous, moderators, thank you so much. If you're here watching this live, the reason why it's such a wonderful and lovely place is because the moderators keep it that way. So thank you so much. If you are watching this live, could you just show them a little bit of love? I'd hugely appreciate it. Commander Ray, Crusader Kings 3, a Game of Thrones mod. Run when? Oh yeah, when am I going to do that? Also, keep up the great work and love the first season of A Knight of the Nine Kingdoms. Fingers crossed on book 4. A lot of things there. So book 4 for Duncan Egg. I have no inside information, but I suspect we will see more Duncan Egg than before we see the Winds of Winter. My feeling. So Crusader Kings 3, yeah, I've talked a few times about the possibility of doing some gaming playthroughs now. They would not just be random games, they would be lore playthroughs, is the idea, for games connected to the worlds that we love. And I would be playing them. I do play video games, but I would not count myself as a gamer, so I'm not playing them to show off my expertise. I'm playing them to explain the lore of the world to you as we go through. So, yeah, Crusader Kings 3 is absolutely on the list of things I would happily do when I find the time. Okay, I think that's me caught up on the chat. So let's go to Stephen Donnelly saying, hi, Robert. I hope you're well. I am. Thank you. I love this first season of Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and think it has captured an audience that perhaps House of the Dragon didn't. I was a little surprised at how explicitly the show addressed Egg's fate at Summerhall. I'm curious if you think this will become a recurring theme in the series to come. So, well, in terms of the audience, yeah, one of the things which has heartened me most about this is the way that the audience grew. as the show went on, and it happened through word of mouth. So people, I saw it again and again. People were saying, "Oh, this is really good. You should watch this." Um, People who'd perhaps given up on Game of Thrones, who'd decided, "Oh yeah, I liked that, but I don't really want to watch more stuff." This hit a slightly different demographic, and I'm really happy about that. I think it worked really well. As for Egg's fate, so we got this foreshadowed very heavily, obviously, when we get the Mystic Woods Witch, whatever we're calling her, coming in and telling the fortunes of Duncan Egg. Now, I'm not going to break down those fortunes again here. I did that a little bit ago, but it definitely talked about Egg's fate at Summerhall. And we also got some other hints. We get the Darren, who we know does get true dreams. He was talking to Doug about his Dunk about his dream of a dragon dying, falling on Dunk, and the room filled with fire. That is new. It was in the graphic novel, but it wasn't in the novella. The fire aspect, which again kind of hints about what's going on there. The madness thing hints about what's going on there. We get a lot of stuff which is a hint to what might be happening in the future. The fact is, I think the vast majority of the casual viewing population didn't really take that on board. It's only us who really went, what? We know what that is referring to. For most people, it's like, oh, well, that's a little bit sinister, and then they moved on. So, is it going to be something recurring? I think probably yes. I think that this is one of the things that, for me, they did really well, which was take the um, the hints of the story to come and just seed it here without making it a part of the story. So the fact that there was somebody telling fortunes was just a part of, here's all. Here's somebody selling goose eggs, here's somebody doing puppet shows, here's somebody selling armor, here's somebody telling fortunes. It felt like a natural part of what was going on there, and that therefore didn't bring attention to it. It was just building the background to this story, and the deeper into it we get, then I suspect the more that we will start to be seeing those kinds of things. So yeah, season 2, season 3, maybe we'll get a bit more. Season 3, we obviously have a Dragon Dreamer in there, so probably quite a lot more. For my people, saying at this point, I think I'd prefer if George R. R. Martin wrote a novella or two, or Fire and Blood Part 2. Perhaps writing something he enjoys will inspire him to finish The Winds of Winter. He has said this exact same thing. He said it he did an interview with James Hibbard in Hollywood Reporter, which he did just before Christmas. It came out just before A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. And he said he does think that if he had the chance to write another Duncan Egg story or Fire and Blood Part 2, then perhaps that would free up his headspace and he would be able to carry on and finish The Winds of Winter. But he's been told that his priority is The Winds of Winter. So my position is, I hope that people, if they ever get the chance, feed up to him. If you think that, I agree with you. I would much rather he writes something he's enjoying, Duncan Egg, Fire and Blood Part 2, whatever. And if that means that he gets the ability to go back to The Winds of Winter and finish it off quickly, great. But I just want him to write more stuff. and I want him to enjoy writing it, not feel under pressure to be writing something that his muse isn't taking him anywhere. So yeah, I 100% agree. Let's go with the Buzzman. Hi, Robert. Happy to finally get a question in on time again. What do you think about the show giving us definitive answers to stuff the book left ambiguous? For example, we most likely saw the blow that killed Baelor, while I believe the novel doesn't outright tell us it was Maker. So no, it doesn't outright tell us that it was Maker, but also I would argue that the show doesn't outright tell us that it was Maker either. We get in the background, this isn't like one of the main things going on. We're mostly focusing in on Dunk and Arian, but we do get to see a hit to the back of the head of Baelor. And Baelor clearly doesn't know exactly who it was, and he says probably it was Maker. Maker clearly doesn't know who it was, and they say, well, people will say it was me, and I meant to kill him. So I think the show has kept the element of slight uncertainty. Probably it was him, but I think we're supposed to go away from the novella also thinking that probably it was him. So I don't think that's changed huge amounts in terms of the making clear stuff that was ambiguous in the novella. There are two things that, as I've already said, George R. R. Martin has said he wanted to remain ambiguous. The egg leaving, was that him just running away? Was that Maekar giving his blessing? And was Dunk actually knighted? So that then I think is three things, three of the main plot points here that are kept ambiguous. Now, I think what they did do was make clearer some of the things uh, about Dunk that perhaps weren't there. So Sir Arlen, for example. Sir Arlen, we only remember through Dunk's memories in the novellas. And he always remembers him fondly, in a good way. But the moment you go into flashback, you actually see what someone was like. And they chose not to always show him in a flattering light. I mean, obviously, once they did show in a very flattering light in a different way, but they went to significant lengths through that episode to show that he was not this ideal true knight that Dunk thinks of him as. He had some true knight qualities, let's not pretend he didn't, but at the same time, he wasn't perfect. Kais Ballerina, is this actually how the Fossaways get their title back after losing it during the reign of Aegon III? They are prominent background characters in court in Song of Ice and Fire, but are never called lords on page. Yeah, I think that's the implication. So this is, they lose their lordship. So and it's never really told exactly when or how they lose their lordship. They were a very noble house, one of the kind of the second tier houses down in the Reach. They could trace their ancestry all the way back to Garth Greenhand, and then at some point they lost their lordship and they became landed knights. That was at some point between the Dance of the Dragons and the Hedge Knight. Now, we've not been told why, what happened. I personally wonder whether this was a Blackfire Rebellion thing, actually, but we're not told. So that's just headcanon for me. The important principle, though, is that this was a family which was a lordly family it was held in high regard, and then it was stripped of a lot of its status, and they were made landed knights. Now, that might be, it might sound like a bit of a technicality, but it's a significant drop down in stature. So, what it means in terms of social status is that the lords are the people who have the power of um, pit and gavel in their area. I think is what they often say. Is they are the people who rule. They are the people who decide the law in their area, subject to the greater law of the land. Landed knights do not. So they have a lord over them. So they are always having to obey the lord of their own lands. They have a castle. They have, they may have a number of knights who are sort of sworn fealty to them, but they are not in charge legally of their own area. So this was a huge drop down for House Fossaway. And the reason why I sort of went into a little bit of detail is not in defense of Stefan Fossaway, but to explain why this was so significant for him. He could be the person who could get their lordship back. This wasn't just like it's my personal glory, I can get this. He was the person who, after the Fossaways for millennia had been at a certain level and then lost it, he could be the person to get it back. And that is too much for him to say no to. Let's go to a question from Geer. I don't know much about the book, so forgive me if these are stupid questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. I have probably said this before. We all start somewhere. And if you've not read the books, then it's not a stupid question. That's why we are here. So, could Dunk become burnt and unrecognizable, possibly hunched after Summerhall, and pick a new name to be a hedge knight again? Yeah, he could do. If he survived Summerhall, as we now think is the case, then he could have become burned and unrecognizable. Personally, I think, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, I think the most likely solution is that he went to the wall as a matter of honor and because he's hugely linked to the wall. So could he have gone into hiding? It's probably fair to say that at that particular moment in time, he was the most recognizable person in the Seven Kingdoms. He had spent his time wandering the Seven Kingdoms. Everybody knew that he was Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. He'd fought. He was a war hero. He'd fought people. He'd added to all of that, he was hugely tall. He is the kind of person that it's not easy to miss. So the idea that he might have got burned and got a little bit hunched over, even so, the idea that he just like found a little cottage and lived out his life and nobody knew he was there, it doesn't quite work for me. And then second question, could the madness be the point? Is it possible that as the others come, the dragon dreaming gets stronger and they'll need a mad Targaryen to see what's going to happen to win? So this is when Dunk says offhandedly, "Are you mad?" And Egg's like, "Does it matter?" That is foreshadowing because I suspect people will say that he is mad when he gets older. Now, George R. R. Martin doesn't have a reductionist view of madness. It's not. He doesn't think, "Oh yeah, that person's mad. That person's sane." He, particularly with the Targaryens, he will associate madness with dragon dreams. And dragon dreams, as Maester Aemon said, all of his brothers had dragon dreams, and those dreams killed them. So Targaryens get dragon dreams, and the dragon dreams that they get seem to shift through time. Did do a video on this a little while ago if you're interested. So initially we get Daenerys the Dreamer dreaming about, okay, you now need to get out of Valyria. Fine, that's step one. What do we do now? Well, it's not clear. But then we get Aegon the Conqueror. He gets a dream, as far as we can tell. He gets a dream, you have to conquer the Seven Kingdoms. And probably also dreams about the others and things like that, scary things coming out of the north. Then we get, as far as we can tell, a little bit of a pause in Dragon Dreamers. At least we're not told of Dragon Dreamers until the dragons have gone. When the dragons have gone, suddenly the Targaryen dragon dreamers are filled with dreams of, let's hatch some dragon eggs. And once the dragon eggs have been hatched by Dany, who also gets the let's hatch the dragon eggs dreams, then she starts getting dreams of being this kind of Azor Ahai figure and flying on a dragon over some ice creatures that she burns and melts. So if you take that as this kind of arc of Targaryen dragon dreams, you see actually it feels like their line is being slowly pushed to get out of Valyria, take over the Seven Kingdoms, rule them strongly. Oh, you lost your dragons. Get the dragons back. Now you've got the dragons, go and kill the others. That seems to be the kind of the arc of the dragon dreams we've got going on. And to return to your question, in terms of madness, I think a lot of the time what the people think of as madness, yes, often is actually Targaryens getting dragon dreams. Lord Medici, come with me to Storm's End, and I will love you like a brother. If not, um, I will hate you like a brother. It felt like Lionel's phrase right there might have been the most Baratheon thing ever to have been said, alternating between brotherly love and hate. This is a family that feels very intensely in either direction. Yeah, I agree. I thought that was a great line. And I think Baratheons do need a steady figure next to them. That seems to be one of the things that works for them. Robert Baratheon needed Ned Stark next to him. Robert Baratheon needed Ned Stark next to him. Stannis Baratheon needed always forget characters' names. How can I forget characters' names? You know who I'm talking about. Somebody in the chat will suddenly go, yeah, of course. But they needed this. Lionel Baratheon needed Dunk next to him. Davos, before anyone gets there. Thank you, Mark Shear. So yeah, he needed Davos next to him. So that does seem to be a part of the character of the Baratheons, that they need this slightly steadier character next to them, more down to earth, with a sense of right and wrong. And they kind of instinctively understand it, but they don't always get it. So Lord Medici, following up on this, is saying, I absolutely love Lionel Baratheon with his yellow cloak and antler walking stick. Yeah, that was really cool. We know he'll end up being the Lord Paramount, but what do we know about his status at this stage? Is he the heir? Is he the younger brother of a lord who dies without issue? We know he'll have a daughter, but any idea of who is her mother? Why is he so anti-Targaryen? Okay, so what's going on with him? So he is... we don't know canonically, but the graphic novel, which George R. R. Martin sort of cleared before it went out, does put him as the heir at the time. So when we see him in The Hedge Knight, he is the heir to Storm's End. which perhaps explains how he can be out and about and having fun, because his father is ruling part of the Seven Kingdoms. Why is he so anti-Targaryen? That is more of a mystery. Perhaps we will find out. Perhaps this is just an example of the lords of the realm who are slowly turning against the Targaryens and slowly understanding that they can turn against the Targaryens. What will be interesting, just as a kind of a nuance on this, is that people here are very open about being against the Targaryens. What you will find, particularly when we get to book 3, is that we've got a new Hand of the King who sees things, knows things that we think that no normal person should be able to know. There's clearly some weird magic going on here. And those who are against the Targaryen rule are taken away and disappeared. This is harsh. This is Bloodraven, of course, we're talking about here, the new Hand of the King. So I do wonder whether this open insubordination against the Targaryens is going to get dampened down by the fact that we're going to have this secret police going on around them. And then when Bloodraven has gone and we get the egg in power, it's going to ramp back up again. And then Lord Medici also saying, I liked the discussion between Dunk and Egg about the number of kingdoms. So I didn't see the need for a Knight of the Nine Kingdoms captions, and the final scene with Maekar implying Egg had run away again. So and then talking about the final scene. So the ending, I would say, I really loved. When I say the ending, when they're riding off into the distance, and then Sir Arlen kind of like heads off in a different direction. I thought that was beautiful. I thought that was really symbolic. Following on as it was from Dunk hammering that penny into the tree, and he's there going, okay, I'm going off now. I probably will never return. And he heads off, and then Sir Arlen goes in a different direction. And this is very, I think, symbolically, very clearly saying he's now moved on. Season 1, he's always like showing his worth and his value by Sir Arlen. And he's there saying, you don't remember Sir Arlen, but he fought for you, he stayed in your halls, etc., etc. He's always trying to justify himself by Sir Arlen. And now, symbolically, Sir Arlen's gone off, so we should expect in seasons 2 and 3 him coming to the fore more as himself and justifying his existence by himself, not just by Sir Arlen. And I thought that was a really beautiful moment. I do have a little nerdy uncertainty there, which is that if you look at books 2 and 3, novellas 2 and 3, you will find, I don't know how many, if I had to guess, 20 to 30 times Dunk thinks about Sir Arlen. Oh, Sir Arlen always said this. Sir Arlen would never like that. Sir Arlen would do this. And he's clearly not moved on. The TV show seems to go, he's now moved on. In novellas 2 and 3, he has not. He's still thinking about Sir Arlen a lot. So how are they going to do this? Are they going to just say, okay, Sir Arlen was a season 1 thing, he's now moved on? Maybe, in which case that to me feels like a small but subtle shift in Dunk's character. Or are they still going to allow him those flashbacks and say, yes, Sir Arlen's gone. He's no longer justifying himself by Sir Arlen, but he is still taking his wisdom. If I had the choice, I'd go with that latter option. Corvus Corax. Good evening, Robert, Dan, and all. What are your thoughts on what was lost and what audiences may lose in coming seasons without Dunk's inner monologue? Thank you for all you do. Well, thank you. So, Dunk's inner monologue. This was a thing that we talked about quite a bit before the season, and then once we'd had one or two episodes, we talked about it a bit more. Because in the novellas, this is all from Dunk's POV. A lot of the story, the thoughts, the plot development happens because we get to hear what Dunk's thinking. On the TV show, they couldn't be that direct. Well, they could, but they decided not to. And instead, very broadly, they replaced Dunk's inner monologue with three things. Now, the first thing was sometimes if Dunk thinks something in the novellas, then he will say it in the books. Classic example, you remember in episode 1, he's there at the inn. Egg has said, "Hello, can I come with you?" And he says no, but here's thanks for looking after the horse. He flicks him a coin. And in the novellas, then he thinks to himself, "Oh, when I'm gone," because Egg just like kind of looks at it. He's a prince. Why does he need a penny? As Dunk rides off, he thinks, "Oh, the moment I'm gone, he'll scoop that up." On the TV show, he actually says it. The moment I'm gone, you'll scoop that up. So that's the first thing that they do. The second thing we've talked about a bit before is the flashbacks. They try to show us a little bit about Sir Arlen and the things that he did, and hope that that kind of explains a lot of Dunk's actions. And then the third thing is talking to the horses. He does talk to the horses quite a bit. So those were the ways that they worked through this. I think broadly speaking, I'm happy with it. I think it works well. I think we do have to accept the fact that this isn't when you adapt a novella, this isn't just word for word. You have to go to a new medium and you have to work with that new medium to try and transpose what you've got over there. So if what you've got over there is a lot of interior monologue, how do you show that actually on film? So I think they did really well with it. Um, as I said a moment ago, I think I'm concerned that we might now lose a little bit of the Sir Arlen stuff, but we didn't really get it. We got him talking a lot about Sir Arlen, but we didn't really get him saying Sir Arlen always said da 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 da. There was a whole lot less of that. Let's go to a question from Lorelei Dragon saying, "Good evening, Robert, and to you. We're enjoying the first signs of spring here. The cherry trees are blooming and the birds are building nests. I hope it's the same for you. Not cherry trees, but crocuses are coming through, and I saw some daffodils on a dog walk just yesterday. So that, yes, it doesn't feel spring-like, but there is a dream of spring in the air, which is lovely." Lionel Baratheon nearly stole the show in this season. The character is larger than life and the actor so charismatic. What are your thoughts on how that character was changed or not from his depiction in the books? Will we see him again in future seasons? Okay, so he is similar to in the books, but they chose to expand upon his character quite a bit, gave him a lot of extra scenes. They missed a couple of things out. Like in the tourneys and the lists, if he defeated an opponent, he would take their helmet and throw it into the crowd, which felt like quite a character moment. But they added in the dancing, the tug of war stuff, the flirting with Dunk bit. I mean, all of that was added there. I really liked it personally. I thought it worked really well. I agree. A lot of that was down to the actor. Daniel Ings, I think, did a fantastic job with that. Are we going to see him again? Well, yes, definitely way down the line. His daughter will be engaged to Egg's firstborn son, and Egg's firstborn son will break off that betrothal, and Lionel Baratheon will basically launch a civil war. That is going to be one of the stories, the Duncan Egg stories, almost without doubt. Might he appear before that? I mean, it's hard to say because we don't have all of the plans from George R. R. Martin. There's no reason to think that he's going to be up in Winterfell. There's no reason to think that he's going to be in the Riverlands for the village hero. But he may appear 2 times. Firstly, with the Third Blackfire Rebellion, where Egg is at that point 18 or so. And I think we'll see a lot of characters coming back. So the Blackfires will invade, and all of the Targaryen loyalists will oppose them. And we know that Egg is there, we know that Maekar is there, we know that Aerion is there, so we're going to get a reunion of those characters. Lionel Baratheon doesn't seem like the kind of person who would just like let a good battle go to waste, so I'm sure he will join the fray as well. Perhaps we'll get a few more characters. This will be a coming together of a lot of those characters. We may also, in season 3, in the Mystery Night, towards the end, Bloodraven basically has summoned an army, and we're not told who's in that army, but it would not surprise me if a couple of these, Maekar, I think, is an obvious candidate. Lionel Baratheon may well be an obvious candidate as well. So they may make cameo appearances. Let's go to Rabbi. Or did I answer that one? Hang on. Let me just double check. Catherine Furseth saying it seems like the Blackfire rebellions. Excuse me a moment. Pardon me. The Blackfire rebellions will form a permanent, important backdrop in this series from season 1 going forward. I think they do a great job portraying how much more precarious the Targaryens' position is in this timeline, as opposed to during the dance. Without dragons, they're much more in need of goodwill and cooperation from at least the High Lords. How do you think they'll keep the focus on the Blackfire things in future seasons? Well, let's first of all talk about what they did in this season, because there's nothing in the novella about the Blackfires in this story, because he hadn't invented them yet. So what they did was they dropped in a few things here and there. Egg sings a song about the Blackfires. He also has that moment when he's like, with a practice sword, and he's like, "Take the Blackfire." And you get the mentions of the Redgrass Field, and you also get, what else do you get? Aerion. It's probably not. Again, this is the kind of thing which is under the radar, but book people may have noticed it. He gives himself the name Bright Flame or Bright Fire, which is almost certainly to try and set him up as an opposite of Daemon Blackfire. Added to which, Aemon and Aegon, that Maester Aemon that we know, and Aegon Egg that we know, they were named by the king, which seems to imply that they are reclaiming the names of Daemon Blackfire's 2 oldest children, who were called Aemon and Aegon. So they have mentioned these things. They've shown in particular Egg's anger and antipathy towards the Blackfires. We also see and I think this is quite an important moment, we also see the impact on the small folk, because that flashback scene that some people really liked, some people didn't like, in episode 5, was set in the wake of the Blackfire Rebellion, the first Blackfire Rebellion. There was a massive battle, the Battle of the Red Grass Fields, just outside King's Landing. And then when we go into King's Landing, we see people lying hurt and dying. This is a huge amount of pain and suffering brought about by what was effectively another Targaryen civil war. Right. Do you think the near-death scene at the Trial of the Seven for Dunk will impact on how they portray his near-drowning death to the Long Inch in Book 2? Yeah, I did wonder that. So, in Book 2, Dunk has this moment where yeah, he thinks he's near death. He probably is near death in a climactic fight. They did that in season 1. They showed Dunk in a climactic fight and then near death, and then somehow pulling himself back and getting on with it and winning. If they focus in on that in season 2, it probably will therefore feel a little bit like, didn't you do that last time? So uh, I suspect they're going to underplay it. I think they're not going to do it as big a thing as they did in season 1. Season 1, it was like Dunk's down, and then we have the long flashback, and then it's like Egg shouting, get up, and then eventually he pulls himself up, and that was a big dramatic moment that spanned quite a bit of time. I suspect they're not going to do it exactly like that in season 2. He has to have this moment where he is nearly dead, but he pulls himself up and he finishes it. I suspect what we will do is by having this not as the dramatic finale of the show. Let's go to Alhad saying, "Hello, Robert. Dunk seems to have a considerable number of descendants. Hence, can you speak about his love life? Just for fun, can you guess how many lovers he would have had?" On the top, he enjoys pretty graphic dreams about them. Well, yeah, at least in the second book, yeah. So he does. We have 2, perhaps 3 love interests that we know of. We've got Tansel and we've got Lady Rohan Weber. There's also in a Bran uh, chapter when he's hooked up to the Weirwood network and he goes back and looks at things through the Winterfell Weirwood network, then he sees a very tall knight kissing a maid, which the fandom are pretty sure is Sir Duncan the Tall. So, and the maid is very probably old Nan, as young Nan. So, yes, he does seem to have an eye for the ladies, so to speak, and he does seem to have several descendants. Brienne is almost certainly confirmed, and that definitely seems to imply that there's at least one more lover connected to Darth. Then we've got, pardon me, Hodor, who very probably is descended from Old Nan, at least that's what we hear. And we've got 2 at the wall. So how many lovers? I mean, I don't get the impression that George R. Martin is going to have him as this great Casanova figure who's going to be sort of spreading his love throughout the Seven Kingdoms. But instead, I think we're going to get characters who return into the story. Lady Rohan Weber, I suspect we will see return to the story later. Tansel returning to the story later. So we're going to have characters who come back. In fact, that was another one of the. We had like a week of spoilers. That was another one of the things that this was Peter Claffey who said and I don't think he thought this was a particular spoiler, and the way he said it wasn't a spoiler, but he said, I think, it seems pretty obvious that at some point then Dunk and Tansel will be in alone in a room together. It was the way he put it. So yeah, I think that we're looking more at recurring characters in Dunk's love life than a never-ending cast list. Let's put it that way. Let's go to Yeldenil saying, hey Robert, good evening to you and everyone involved in the channel. I really like the character of Stefan Fossaway. Can you tell us a bit more about the Fossaways and their history or possible significance in the larger story? So, yeah, I talked a little bit about this earlier, but House Fossaway can trace their ancestry all the way back to Garth Greenhand, who is this great legendary figure, particularly celebrated in the Reach, first king of the First Men, that kind of thing. And so they were one of the great ancient houses down in the Reach. And we know the names of several other ones. We've also got the High Towers. We've got the Tarleys. We've got the Tyrells. There were lots of them. These kind of like second-tier houses, but below the Gardeners. Lots of those houses around that area claimed some inheritance all the way back. So they were there and they were powerful for a very long time. But at some point, and we don't know exactly when, my headcanon is the First Blackfire Rebellion, but at some point they lost their lordship and became landed knights. They regained it through what happened here. Stefan regained that, but Raymond formed a cadet branch, which is basically him saying, well, I'm not going to be associated with the main house. I'm going to start up my own family. But he will have started up his own family just as a knight. And maybe he gets his own house sort of like mini castle. So he might be sort of a landed knight, but that's about it. The Fossaways do play a little bit of a role. We see them mentioned a few times, mainly with the Army of the Reach, but they don't do anything hugely significant in A Song of Ice and Fire. So, Craig saying, Dunk twice turned down offers in episode 6 to get better training at Storm's End and Summerhall. When do you think Dunk actually gets any training? In books 2 and 3, he continues to rely mainly on size, speed, and flea bottom brutality. Yeah, and I think that's really important. He his fighting style, which is very reminiscent of Brienne, and this is another one of the hints George R. Martin gives us, but his fighting style is very reliant on brute strength and size. He's not a very good jouster, it has to be said. He thinks maybe he could be, but from what we've seen, probably not. When he does fight, the two big fights we've seen, plus, a little fight here or there, he is just about punching people, pushing them down, getting on top of them and just pummeling them. That's what he's about. And because he is so tall and he's so muscly, then that is very effective. So, will he ever get training? Almost certainly at some point. He will become a member of the Kingsguard, and the training options will then be available to him. But also a little bit before that, George R. Martin has told us the titles that he's planning for the different Dunk and Egg stories. One of them is called The Sellsword, which opens up this idea. We don't get many sellswords in Westeros. They're mostly, sellsword is more of a concept over in Essos. So might he go over there? If he does join a sellsword company, then I'm sure that they would train him up, because that's what they do. It's on their in their best interest to train up new recruits to be good at fighting. So I think he will, but probably not yet. Skagzilla saying, hey Robert, I hope you're doing well. I am, thank you. Both Lionel and Makar invite Dunk to join them, and that got me thinking about the various seats of the great houses, and that led to two questions. or what is the most impregnable or defensive great house, and which would you rather have for your seat? Okay, so George R. R. Martin has answered the question about which is the strongest castle in Westeros. I did a whole video. If you want the full breakdown, I did a whole video on it. Feel free to go and search for it. But his short answer is it's Casterly Rock. That you can have some castles on top of hills with strong walls. Casterly Rock is literally burrowed into this massive rock, and they've not got walls this thick. They've got, you know, massive like stone walls. Um, it's never been taken, other than the land. The clever thing that happened perhaps in ancient history, but no invading force has ever taken it. There's literally no the way they showed it on the show was as a normal castle, but in the book, then there's only one tower visible on the top of the rock, which is where the ravens are. Beyond that, everything is dug into the mountain. So that, George R. R. Martin has said, is the most or the strongest castle. Where would I rather have my seat? Well, I've said this many times. I think Highgarden just sounds delightful. The weather's nice, lots of food. Um, the culture is there of flowers and music and knightly virtues and fair maidens, and what else could you possibly want? This is the idyllic high fantasy world that we've got going on down there, and the center of that is Highgarden. So yeah, that seems to be the best idea. Johnny Seriani, what do you make of the innkeeper and the fortune teller appearing to be the same person? I can't imagine the show was on such a tight budget that they couldn't get a second actor. If they are the same person, why might an innkeeper travel a full day and leave the inn unattended just to tell fortunes? Yeah, so we noted this at the time. I think it was actually Aziz, History of Westeros, who pointed this one out to me. It is the same actress, the innkeeper in episode 1, and then the fortune teller in episode 2, whenever it is. Same actress. Now, there are a number of different answers to this. One is this is actually something that TV shows do. They got an actor in who seems pretty good. They do their role, and they say, "Well, can you just hang around for a bit?" Maybe the person they hired to do that got ill on the day. They need somebody to step in. These things happen. So option one is just it's just one of those things. They weren't really thinking about it. It doesn't mean much. It just happens to be the same actress, and they went to some lengths to make her look different. The hood over the head, the skin color, things along those lines. So, and she didn't sound the same either. So, first of all, a hat tip to the actress whose name I have forgotten, but a hat tip there. Yeah, it felt like two different characters. I did not know that they were two different characters, or they were the same actress playing two different characters. I just thought they were two different characters. So, a hat tip to the actress. If it wasn't, or if it was intentional, um, could it have just been a person who was just trying to make some money? Yeah, it's possible. The leaving your inn, I mean, the way that the inn was sold to us to start with was that it was completely empty, other than Egg and Daron, because they everyone was at the tourney, and that kind of makes sense. That if you're going to go that way, you'd have gone to the tourney, so there's nobody who needs to be there. It was made clear that she wasn't the only person there. There were other people around in terms of staff. So if she does have two jobs and thought, you know what, I can go off and tell a few fortunes. That kind of makes sense. Also, I quite like the idea that maybe she was there and Darren was saying a few things, and she thought, "Oh, okay, I'll put up the hood. I'll remember what he said. I'll go off and tell those fortunes." That seems fun. Um, but I think it's just that this is a um, fortune teller of some kind. And we shouldn't look too closely about who the actress is. I think the way that they did it, and I would love somebody, feel free down in the comments after the video, have a look at this because I've not looked in enough detail. Clearly, somewhere on one of her cheeks, there is some kind of mark. Some people have suggested that might look like kind of a blood raven mark on her face. I've also heard that she's got mismatched eyes. Some people are wondering whether this might be Shira Sea Star. I, I have to admit, I've not seen the clues to know this. I like the idea, though, that maybe Shira Sea Star is there. Yeah, I think it's left open. I think a lot of these things are left open to our own interpretation. Let's go with James Horner saying, "Hello, Robert. I hope you're doing well. I am, thank you. Have you seen Hills Alive's video about Baelor fighting for Dunk? She argues that although he was obviously motivated to help Dunk, he was also fighting for his house. She points out that House Targaryen is not as powerful as it once was. They're not covering themselves in glory by so obviously stacking the deck against Dunk, a knight who remembered his vows. She points out towards the attitudes of Raymond and Lionel, saying that they clearly are not as popular as the history books would have us believe. I think, although it makes sense, it seems a bit cynical as well. What are your thoughts?" Well, I don't have to admit, I don't know Hills Alive's. I'll try and check that out. So I've not seen the video. Why did Baelor do it? I think the overwhelming thing I will go with this isn't a Song of Ice and Fire. This has a heart and it has an optimistic view of some parts of human nature. And Baelor, George R. Martin's been very clear. Baelor was going to or would have been a very good king to the extent that he could have changed the entire timeline of House Targaryen going forwards. So I am okay with this idea that he did do it just for the noblest of reasons. I do buy into this idea also that, yeah, he would understand that if you have the Targaryens against the others, there's no win there for the Targaryens. If you look at it and you go, okay, so what happens? We get the members of the Kingsguard, uh, Baelor, Aerion against a few rando people, one of whom has got a broken leg, one of whom hasn't got any armor and just got knighted literally that moment, one of whom is a hedge knight who's never done a joust in his entire life. If when the Targaryens win, that they don't look great. It's just like, well, of course, there's nothing for them to win. If they lose, then that would look really bad for them. Him coming out onto the other side actually does kind of even up the odds a little bit more, but also evens up the PR following it. So yeah, if you were to imagine yourself as this guy's kind of strategy and comms director backstage, you would say, yeah, maybe that's a good plan. Don't just go with the one side of beating up on the guys who people are kind of sympathetic towards at this point. If you go on the other side, you're not going to die, obviously, because the Kingsguard aren't going to attack you, but it makes it look like you're standing up for peace and justice. Hello, James. Sorry for the length of this one. Wanted to give context. I think the fan base often debates the existence of different deities. Um, The seven who are one often come out as the one most often said not to exist or have no power. Specifically with the with the trials by combat or the trials of seven, people just naturally assume the religious aspect is always nonsense and it's simply the better fighter who will win. Do you think in some cases, specifically those in the main plot, they may actually be affected by the seven and be their influence on the story? The trial of the seven or trial of seven, making sure Dunk raises Egg and potentially keeps him away from the sickness that wiped out much of his family, putting the correct lineage on the throne would be a prime example. So I've already talked a little bit about this one, so I'm not going to go into, I hope you saw what I said earlier. I'm going to go into huge amounts of details. I do like this theory that Dunk saw all of the aspects of the seven there. The crone, the mother, the father, the maiden, etc. So all of that kind of fits in. But is this the seven wanting this to happen? Um, I mean, if you from the faith of the seven's perspective, why would they want Baelor dead? Um, it doesn't for me that doesn't quite work out. The realm, if we're taking the faith of the seven as being a religion that is there in support of the realm was only weakened by Baelor dying. Everybody thought, even Sir Arlen thought, that when he was king, he would be a good king. And so him dying was not going to help. So I don't think I see the hand of the seven here. Uh, the only hand I could possibly see is the hand of somebody who wants to kill Baelor, to prune down the Targaryen family tree. And that could be Bloodraven. But as I say, I'm not saying that is the case. I'm just saying it's the only possible there. Okay, so that's the last of my questions about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. We've got some more questions here about broader issues, but if you want more questions, or if you got more questions about Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1, do drop them into the chat now. It's a good time to do so. Um, oh, I just remembered a thing. I was reminded about this before. Hype. Um, if you have a hype, I've no idea how this works, but if you have a hype button there, I think it's only in some places, for channels of a certain size, if you click the hype button and enough people click the hype button, then your video gets pushed more by the algorithm. I've never seen a hype button. I don't know what it is, but I've been told that this is a good thing. So if you have, thanks for leaving the thumbs up, etc. But if you could also look for that, I would hugely appreciate it. And then tell me down in the comments so I can have a look, and you can tell me what happened, because it sounds fun. Okay, let's go to, pardon me. Andrew Kay saying, where do you think this season ranks among Game of Thrones seasons 1 to 4 and House of the Dragon season 1? It's quite high up, in my opinion. Yeah, it's quite hard. I mean, I really enjoyed this. I I think something like Game of Thrones seasons 3 and 4, for me, that's when they started to really peak. I wouldn't quite put it that far yet. We've not had the build-up of characters that you can get. I'm not saying it's not going to get there. It could well do that, but I think if we get the build-up of the story arc and the characters, then that could pay off more later. Yeah, I think I'd probably just, if I had to roughly rank it, then I would kind of put it above the season ones. I would say I think season 1 of both House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones were very good, but I think I would put this as the most successful season 1 out of them. Yeah, Tennis Mercer saying, I'm scrambling to find said hype button. I've been told it's there. Agree Weirwood saying, I've seen it and clicked it before. Yeah, I think it's there. It is there. I've been told it's there, but I obviously can't see it. If you find it, tell me. Lady Pushkins, why do you think Othor and Jafer could pass the wall and reanimate, but Cold Hands couldn't? Is it just down to different magic? So this is back in A Game of Thrones, book 1. You'll remember that they discover a couple of bodies of dead Night's Watchmen and drag them back through the wall, and then during the night they kind of animate and start attacking people. General Mormont, for example. How did that happen? We're told that the wall has got these magical defenses against the undead, to the extent that Coltan says that he can't pass the wall, and it by implication means that the others can't pass the wall. So what was going on there? So I think this is the headline is that George R. R. Martin does not want to tell us the details of how the magic system in his world works. He wants it to be a little bit mysterious. But we've got a few options. Maybe the tunnel through the wall in Castle Black is actually, that's actually a proper gate through, and the magic doesn't cover that bit. I don't think that's the case, but maybe. More probably, what this is that they got taken through. They didn't go through of their own volition, which is a distinction that has its roots in more kind of horror fiction from centuries before. For example, Dracula, he cannot cross running water unless he's taken. So he gets to cross the sea, goes up to Whitby. He gets to cross running water if somebody carries him across, and that it seems to be what's going on here. George R. R. Martin likes this idea of kind of echoing previous kind of horror things. He doesn't have to spell it out, but if he just leaves the hint of this there, then in our brains, somewhere in the back of our brains, we go, oh yeah, I kind of understand that. And that makes us make the link across to a character as fearsome as, say, Dracula. Paul Whitrock saying, hello, Robert. I know that on the whole you are very positive about the adaptations from books to the screen, but I'm wondering if there are any iterations you like or dislike or think handle it better. In terms of Game of Thrones things, well, yes, I am generally positive. Partly because I just like this stuff. um, Partly also, one thing I've always said on this channel is that I'll probably never say much if I don't like something, because life's too short to spend your life just talking about how much you hate something. I'll just stop talking about it and I'll start talking about things I do like. So, you can probably, if you go back through the history of the main channel, you can probably pick out a couple examples of things that I kind of lost a bit of passion for over time, and stopped talking about so much. And that means that the things I did talk about were things that I was passionate about. And that's just my attitude towards this. I don't think you want to hear me saying all of the horrible things I think about certain things. I think you much rather me talk about things that inspire me and are exciting. So yeah, I think that's a certain element of it. In terms of, are there any that I particularly do or don't like, just in terms of Game of Thrones and the wider Game of Thrones world? We've been talking a lot about Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. It's fresh in all of our minds. I thought that was fantastic. As a sort of as close as it comes to a negative, or what I would talk about, House of the Dragon season 2. Let's go with I think what is a useful corrective to a narrative that often happens, which when talking about that, I don't think it fell off a cliff in any way, shape, or kind of idea of what might happen, way, shape, or form. It's and George R. R. Martin himself liked the first half of the season. We often forget it. Go back, have a look at his Not a Blog if you want. You have a look, see what he said when he got his screeners, when he got to have a look at episodes 1, 2, and 4. He specifically says how much he likes them. He thinks they're fantastic. The problems were in the second half of the season, and the problems were two connected issues. The first issue was that HBO decided quite late in the day that they wanted to save some money and have 8 episodes, not 10. And when I say quite late in the day, I hear various reports, but 2 to 3 months before they were going to start filming. Now, what happens there is you have to roll with the punches if you're writing shows like this. But they obviously had to go back and look at all of the scripts and say, well, okay, so we've got an arc here for the season that doesn't now work because, do we squash everything in? Do we cut some off the end? How do we work this? And they were working really hard at trying to figure out how to do this. And I think they seem to have decided the first half of the season, okay, they're going to keep that roughly as it is. The second half of the season, they started rewriting. But then the second issue happened, which was there was a writer's strike, which we forget about. But this went on for a long time. And it went on for almost all of the filming of House of the Dragon. Now, when something like this is being filmed, the writing team are there and will make changes as they go along. Things that they film that just don't quite work for whatever reason. When the actors actually perform it, it just doesn't kind of feel right, and so they might rewrite a scene. They might do a little bit of extra stuff. They might shift stuff around. They might create some extra scenes or something to sort of add at the end of the shooting. They could not do any of that. They literally, the moment that they started filming, boom, that was it. They had to film exactly what was on the page. And the combination of those two things was what made the second half of House of the Dragon a little bit more meh, in my view. I don't think it was bad. I still enjoyed watching it, but it was more 6 out of 10 than 8 out of 10, which was the first half of the season was. That all makes me quite excited, ironically, maybe, for season 3, because those conditions aren't there. Now, George R. R. Martin has not been involved in season 3 at all, and we have to kind of acknowledge that. But in terms of the writing team have been able to do what they wanted with this. So I will always prefer to have a TV show where the creatives have been given free rein than one where the powers that be have been holding them back. Paul Witchrock saying, well said, thank you. Oh, thank you. Slick Will saying, is it possible we could see Egg convincing Dunk to stop by Starfall on the way to Dawn for training and soap at his grandparents? Elena Tyrell vibes. Yeah, quite possibly. So we don't know the exact timeline, but if you get your mental map up of the south of Westeros, we know he went to Old Town, and we know he was at Dawn. And in order to get from one to the other, you could go from Old Town all the way up into the Prince's Pass and then all the way back down again. Or you could work your way across the coast past Starfall and through into through mountain passes into Dawn that way. Now, is that likely that they did that. I mean, it's entirely possible. Why would he do that? Because yeah, he's got family. The Danes are family. His mother's a Dane, um, or yeah, grandmother. So he's no, it is mother. Hang on, I'm getting myself confused with the Targaryen family tree is a very easy family tree to get confused by. So do not wait if you ever like go, oh, hang on, which generation are there? Do not worry about it too much. But yes, he's got family there, so it's entirely possible. I don't think, given the fact that George R. R. Martin hasn't really mentioned it, I don't think that um, that's going to be a significant part of the story. But who knows? For my peoples, this was an excellent season of TV, and Dexter Sol Ansel shall henceforth be regarded as an international treasure. His performance was great. Yeah, I agree. So um, I will happily state here now, for the record, there were some amazing performances on the show. I think Baylor, I think Makar, I think Lionel Baratheon was great. There were lots of great supporting act things going on, but the whole show would not have worked if Dunk and Egg did not have the chemistry that they did, uh, or if either of the characters did not embody the character that was there on the page. And George R. R. Martin has said they just walked off the page into the TV show, and I think there's no greater credit than that. They the feel of the novellas is a joyous one. You love these characters, you care about these characters, um, and in a very short season, they made people love them and care about them, and I think that's great. So hats off, Dexter, Sol Ansel, Peter Claffey. I think they did a brilliant job. Peter Claffey, I think in particular, almost every scene he was in, if he had one misstep, the whole thing would have collapsed around him. But he just embodied it so well. So yeah, hats off to them. They're fantastic performances. Um, Off-topic question from. Oh, sorry, I didn't check who that was from. One of my patrons. If we assume that Littlefinger ordered the Faceless Men to kill Ned Stark, what did he give up? Has his ancestral home? He has his ancestral home and his wealth. He doesn't seem interested in being impoverished. So if we believe the waif, that there was half her father's gold was used to hire Faceless Men. If you go with Euron, a dragon egg, Littlefinger has a seat on the small council, ancestral home. He's wealthy. What did he give up? So this is my working theory that the reason why we get a Faceless Man, Jaqen H'ghar, in the train of people heading north to go to the Night's Watch is because he was there to assassinate someone. That's what they do. Who was he there to assassinate? Well, not Arya. Not uh, That's now two names I've forgotten entirely. It is getting late. But the most obvious person is Ned, who should have been in that wagon train because he'd cut a deal. He'd cut a deal that if he admits his guilt, he wasn't guilty, but if he admitted his guilt, then he would be set free and allowed to go and join the Night's Watch. And so everybody expected that to happen. But it didn't happen because Joffrey was Joffrey and ordered him killed. Now, that shocked everyone around them. So my working theory is that we get the Faceless Man there as Littlefinger's backup policy. He wanted Joffrey to order Ned's assassination. But if that did not happen, there was no way that he could allow Ned Stark to go north. Why? Because Ned would tell Cat what happened. And cat would never forgive Littlefinger, and Littlefinger cared more about that than anything else. Where might he have got the money to hire them? Well, maybe he only hired on a contingency basis, that if he was already, if if Ned was still alive, then you kill him. I don't know, but I don't think finding money was Littlefinger's problem. Yes, this was a big mark, but Littlefinger, we get so many different quotes about he could just like make money appear out of nowhere. He would be able to do that. He was the arch accountant. He could make it appear. Gendry, thank you very much. So that's the. It would. I don't personally see this as an issue. Littlefinger getting hold of the money, yeah, maybe. Ray Blackfire saying Faceless Men have a no kill, no fee policy. I mean, that's basically what I'm trying to say. Yeah. I don't know if that's the case, but it's entirely possible. April May saying Yoren was the real target. He had the axe in his head that Arya gave them on in the cage. Then Jaqen leaves for a while because he got his target there. Yeah, I mean, Jaqen did die, but I don't personally see that anyone would pay a faceless man to kill him. Why would you need to pay a faceless man to kill him? So yeah, I mean, I like the thinking, but I don't think that's the case. Adam Keats saying, "Hello, Robert and Dan. Thinking far ahead to season 2 of House of the Dragon, how would you like them to depict Adam Vallarion's trip to the Isle of Faces? I would like to find out why he went and hopefully what he learned there. I don't mind the Isle itself not being shown, staying mysterious." Yeah, so he should. I mean, in the books, then apparently he does. He flies off. He's imprisoned and then released. Um, by his friends and his father, and he flies off and gathers an army. And he gathers an army to go off down to Tumbleton. While he's about that, he goes to the Isle of Faces and consults the Green Men, is what we're told. He gathers his army, he goes down to Tumbleton, and he dies, and his dragon dies, and we don't hear anymore. So that's the kind of the headline, but because this is the Isle of Faces, then we're all kind of like, oh, what's going on? And in particular, because he's got no link to the First Men, to the Old Gods, to the Weirwood Network. There's like no link at all that we can see. So why on earth did he go? What did he learn? It's a mystery. How would I like it to be handled in House of the Dragon? I think the more I think on it, given the fact that George R. R. Martin is not involved, I think anything they showed on the Isle of Faces would just be their thoughts, not what George's thoughts are. So I no longer view this as a potential lore drop, if that makes sense. I view this as, do the writing team, does the showrunner want to go there because it would be cool? Which I can sympathize with. If I were showrunner of House of the Dragon, I would want to do cool things too. But yeah, I don't think I was once quite excited by this, but now I know that George R. R. Martin is not going to be involved in any way in showing what's on there. I'm quite a bit less so. Okay, so headline, what do I want to see? I want to see him flying over there and landing, and then coming up again some other point, and it not mentioned. I want it just to, that happened, but we're not giving any more. So let's have a quick flick through the chat. That's all my questions from my patrons. And let's have a look. Agreed. Weirwood saying Littlefinger had the whole collateral of the Iron Throne to work with. Yeah, he could gain money that way. Do you think Chris Starch saying, do you think Dunk gets to the wall and joins the Night's Watch? This is after Summerhall. Yeah, I think that's probably the most likely option now. I did a video, is he cold hands, which is an extra step of logic after that. But what would he do? If he, as Lord Commander, had let his king and his best friend die, what would he do? Not carry on a member of the King's Guard for the next king. He would probably resign and go to the wall, because that's Dunk. So yeah, it kind of rings true for me. Slick Will saying, I'm thinking that the meaning of sellsword is what they call Duncan in Dawn, since they have no hedges in the desert. Yeah, I like that idea. That's quite cool. Sellsword is, yeah, it's mostly used in. So this is one of the titles of the future Duncan Egg stories, the sellsword. I just like the idea of him heading off and joining one of the free companies for a while. Kind of works. Aaron Son X saying Robert's summary of Adam's visit to the Isle of Faces. It's a mystery. If George R. R. Martin were involved, I'd be very happy for him to tell us a bit more. But I don't think so. Okay, I think with that, let's draw this one to a close. I think. Apologies again if you're watching this one live for the slight technical issues. To start with, I will try and get that sorted out. I have such a great microphone and a new laptop. It was going to be so great. But in any event, I'm trying to set up another, sort of a final Q&A session looking at A Night of the Seven Kingdoms before we move on and start thinking further forward about other things. So keep an eye out for that one. That'll be on this channel. Beyond that, videos on the main channel and also wherever else you get stuff. So if you find it easier to watch stuff over on Spotify, listen to things over on Apple or Facebook. I'm up on Facebook. In fact, hello, people on Facebook. If you're watching this live, I noticed quite a few people have been watching this on Facebook. So great to see you. Yeah, I think that's probably it. If you are watching moderators, thank you again. You're amazing. Patrons, thank you. You're amazing. If you are watching this back a little bit later, here-ish will be a link to other live streams that I have done. Here-ish is a link to my Patreon page, the best way to support this channel, if you so wish. Kate, who's a member for 12 months. Thank you very much. Saying thank you again for another great live. Well, thank you very much. I hugely appreciate it. I will be back this time next week with a live stream about who knows what, but I will let you know in advance. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again soon.